Hey, it's Justin Popovich here, and somewhere on the other side of my screen is Daniel Cape. Daniel, say
Hey,
hello.
hey, how's it going, Justin? Thanks for
Good.
thanks for having me on today.
Absolutely, doing well. So, for those of you tuning in here, welcome to this interesting and unique presentation here at Tools for Motivation. If you've been following us for a while, you know that we specialize in done-for-you self-help programs, and we also like to do a lot of different unique training webinars and different training presentations. We've got a giant training blog on our website. You've probably seen me giving you lower-level tutorials on how to use our content. More recently, we've been trying to expand our reach a little bit and do some other trainings that kind of get outside of that box. And I think today is really the furthest we've gone, but in a really exciting, cool kind of way. We've got Daniel Cape. So he's going to be doing an interesting presentation with us here about creative thinking. Daniel, we're going to keep this pretty informal today as we kind of set the stage before we hit record here. For the people watching, why don't you just give us, like a 60-minute quick intro about who you are, kind of a little bit of your past and what you're going to be showing us today.
Yeah, so right now I'm working on my PhD in psychology with a focus in creativity studies, and I consider myself a creativity educator or trainer. So I work with groups and individuals, and my goal is to strengthen the organization or the individual through a foundation of creativity. I like to focus on creative skills and techniques that anybody can use at any time. My background, it's pretty diverse. My background is really an experiential education. So I've taught at outdoor education camps. I've taught in a project-based learning school in classrooms. I was the director of an English language summer camp in Ukraine for a summer. And I've also got a military background. So I was an officer, an engineer officer in the military. And I'm a caricature artist. I've been drawing caricatures for about 15 years, a little over 15 years. And for me, all of that is about the experience. And I try to help people become more creative or discover new knowledge through providing experiences, quality experiences that lead to growth and understanding.
Very cool. Yeah, I've had a couple of conversations leading up to this training with Daniel. He's got a really interesting story. I saw a bunch of his drawings. They're awesome. I love. If there's
Thanks.
time later, maybe you can pull some of those out and show us, or we can put them
Yeah,
on the web page that we're on here somewhere.
absolutely. Nice. I got some right here. So,
So yeah, I'll let you kick off your presentation in just a second here, but just to kind of preface this for our viewers, um, Daniel's got a little something prepared for us about creative thinking, but I also intend to kind of chime in here, ask questions as we go, because a big part of what we do with creating done-for-you content for people is give them a baseline to start with, but allow them to inject their own creativity into the material that we're building for them. So if somebody wants to build a course that they're going to teach to their existing clients and they're rolling out a new platform, or maybe they're starting a coaching program, or they want to write a new book to launch this year, doing their book outlines or their marketing for that book requires lots of work and creative thought to do it. And so we give them our content as a starting point, but I always really encourage our customers to add their own flair. And a lot of people kind of hit a wall because it's like, well, I'm not creative. I don't know what to do with this. And so I thought this would be kind of cool, just get people's wheels turning a bit. And I think you would agree that everybody is creative when given the right inspiration, and hopefully a little bit of what you say today will help them believe that for themselves.
yeah, absolutely. Everybody is creative, and I'm going to give them some tips they can apply right away today.
All right, let's go for it.
All right. So, yeah, as you just mentioned, I'm going to talk about creative thinking, and I'm going to focus on the foundation of creative thinking, which is basically divergent thinking. To kind of back up and talk about creativity and what it is, a lot of people think that creativity is some abstract concept that you're born with it or you don't have it, or it's only for weirdos or artists or these mad geniuses. But the fact is that everyone is creative. And part of being creative is just being open to new ideas and surprises and outcomes and things like challenging assumptions and some of the other topics that I'm going to focus on today. So the first thing before we try to be creative, whether you're working with a client or a group or even yourself, you have to have safety in your environment. And that safety goes for you have to be able to share ideas no matter how ridiculous they sound. That means lacking or letting go of judgment. I'm going to talk about that in a little while. But we have to feel safe around the people that we're sharing ideas with, because a lot of us, we have those underlying fears of being judged or of being wrong. But it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to make mistakes. Actually, when I do an activity where when I teach people creativity, I have them draw a caricature of me. And one of the rules is that they have to make mistakes. And I tell them, if you're not making mistakes, you're not following the rules, because it's going to happen. And so if you make that an expectation, then people are more open to trying new things. And along with that comes trust. You need to be able to trust that other people are going to listen to you and not criticize your ideas. Creativity it's a very personal thing in a lot of ways, but it's something that, as you mentioned, we all have it and it's important to our lives. So yeah, the first thing, you got
Oh,
to
Daniel, just
establish that.
by the way, I just stopped our video feeds here for people watching. We're actually recording this on a Zoom meeting room right now, and sometimes the video feed will actually interfere with the audio if the bandwidth isn't great. So I really want to focus on what Daniel's saying and his slides. So I killed the video for now. Just if anybody's watching, nothing's wrong. Everything's good to go here. So go ahead, Daniel. I just wanted to mention that for the viewers here.
Yeah, no problem. Now they can see the slides better too. But yeah, pretty much you have to have a safe environment. You have to be open to people's ideas and just be compassionate and be open to making mistakes. Creativity, simply defined, is something that's new and useful or novel and has application. And so if something's new and it's never been done before, you're gonna fail, you're gonna make mistakes, you're gonna mess up, you're gonna look silly. But who cares? It's the goal, it's the process. I know a lot of your viewers are entrepreneurs. They're doing their own things. They probably understand that the value of risk and failing and making mistakes, and it's an awesome thing.
Well, they do, and what's interesting about that is we get a lot of people coming to us saying that they've built something but they can't get it done. And when I really dive into the heart of what's going on, whether it's they can't launch it or they can't just complete the project they started, it's some form of perfectionism in there. They can't let go of the fact that they just feel like another round of edits is going to get them to the place they need to be. But really,
Yeah,
it's what it goes back to what you're saying here is they don't feel safe enough to make a mistake. And so problem number one, they don't get their product launched or they don't get their idea out or whatever it is for their world. But then problem number two is it actually interrupts their creative capacities. They're so risk averse that they don't even allow themselves to make those mistakes. So I think you hit on a pretty big one here for people.
yeah. Creativity is interesting, especially when you're the first person doing something. I When I was writing my book on the connections between creativity and experiential education, there were times when I'm like, do I even know what I'm talking about? Does it make any sense? Am I going crazy? But you have to believe in that, and you have to be comfortable with that ambiguity and that uncertainty. And we're going to look at that a little bit here in some of these next slides. But yeah, definitely, I'm not a perfectionist, so it's easier for me to say, but you have to be okay with making mistakes and failing. That's, man, I love failing. You got to push yourself outside your comfort zone.
And I know, sorry, I know you want to move on, but this topic is fascinating to me, and I wanted to
Yeah,
relate my own experience back to that as well. Is in our business, we're constantly bringing new products to the market, and so we have to innovate and try new ways to get the message out there. And our whole company, but me specifically, I struggle with uh, coming up with creative ideas, kind of like what you were just saying. Is this going to work? Is this a topic people are going to want to purchase? And then I'll come up with a marketing angle. And then again, is this the right marketing angle for it? So I'm trying creative things, but at the same time, I have no idea if it's going to work half of the time. When it does, I look like a smart guy, but when it doesn't, then I don't. So
yeah, definitely. And there's actually something, it's called design thinking. It's a process, it's a creative process. And I don't have enough time to talk about it today, but if you wanted to look that up, one of the ideas behind that is that you build a prototype and then you test it out before you invest money in it. Um, there's a company called IDEO that is an innovation company, and their philosophy is you got to fail soon so you can succeed faster. So
right, love
yeah,
it.
yeah. So today we're going to talk about divergent thinking. And as I said, this is basically the foundation of creativity. Divergent thinking is the act of generating multiple solutions to one problem or multiple uses for one product. And I don't know if you've seen one of the most popular or successful TEDx talks is by Sir Ken Robinson. It's Does School Kill Creativity?
Love it. That's one of my
And
favorites.
yeah, it's great. Oh my gosh, he's amazing. And the idea is that in school, we're taught that there's one right answer, and that, yeah, there's one right answer, and you need to find that one right answer. And that's convergent thinking. And that's part of creativity as well. And I'll touch on that a little bit here later. But divergent thinking is coming up with multiple solutions for one problem. So I have a question. You can't see me on the computer, that's fine. But let's say I have a pen in my hand, and this is not a trick question. What is a pen used for?
Well, the obvious one would be to write things down on paper.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. When you see a pen, you know it's used for writing. When you need to write something, you look for a pen. Now let's reframe this problem, and I want you to think from the perspective of a 3-year-old. How might a 3-year-old use a pen?
To maybe dig a lost toy out of a crevice somewhere.
Yeah.
To
Or as a
defend
sword?
themselves against an older sibling, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, a sword to pick their nose, as people always say. Or a pen can be a rocket ship. So there's multiple uses for a pen. And what happens is when we come into the world, we have no idea what a pen is used for. A pen is just an object. And so when we're younger, we do those things like we defend ourselves from an older sibling, or we use it to dig a toy out of a crevice or something like that. But as time goes on, and this typically happens around ninth grade, but we're boxed into this kind of conformist thinking where no, a pen is used for writing. And so we give up that imagination, we give up that creativity, and we stop thinking of other ways to use a pen. And it's not just a pen, it's every object that we ever see. But the idea is that a pen can be used for many things. It can be used to defend yourself off from a sibling. I mean, or a pen can be used as defense, like there's pen knives, right? A pen can be used in the sense of maybe medication, because when you inject yourself with insulin or an EpiPen. So there's other ways to use a pen, and that's divergent thinking. And it's good to know and be aware, consciously aware, that there's other solutions that we can find. When we do this, when we use divergent thinking, there's some guidelines that we use. And I'm going to talk about those next. So it might sound a little counterintuitive to have rules or guidelines for creative thinking, but a lot of people think creativity is just, go off and be creative, no rules. The fact is that if we understand some of the guidelines for being more creative, it's going to help us focus and give us guidance for coming up with these ideas that are going to innovate, that are going to make our businesses more successful. They're going to help our clients to find surprising solutions that change their lives. So here are the four guidelines, and I'm going to talk about each one individually. I also want to mention that there's something I talked about convergent thinking earlier. And convergent thinking is when you narrow your ideas down to the best idea. And that's part of creativity too. But it's important that you separate divergent thinking and convergent thinking. Because right now we're talking about divergent thinking. This is coming up with all these ideas. Once we've come up with all these ideas, with lots of ideas, then we move to the next step. And we're eventually going to do convergent thinking. I'm not going to talk about that today. I'm just going to focus on divergent thinking. So let's start. So the first thing, again, is defer judgment. Let's say and this is also similar to brainstorming. If you've ever been in a brainstorming session where we're trying to raise our clientele to 25 more people. We want to come up with ideas, and we've all seen the dry erase boards with ideas. Using sticky notes are great. And we're trying to come up with ideas to reach 25 more clients. One person says, what if we do a marketing campaign? Someone else says, what if we use a Facebook ad? And then another person says, no, we tried Facebook ads last week, it didn't work, or 2 years ago and it didn't work. So that person, may not realize it, but they just closed off that creative thinking. They shut down that person and their idea. Right now, like I mentioned, we're just trying to come up with ideas. And if we judge these ideas, it's going to be like roadblocks, and you're going to close doors, those mental doors to those unexpected solutions. And this takes, you have to be conscious of this. I've done it myself. I was working with some kids, and I forgot what the activity was, but this one kid was already messing around with the materials that I gave him, and I was getting frustrated. And I told the kids, like, maybe we can use a shark or a dinosaur. And then people were coming up with ideas, and this one kid said he had created this really cool thing. And he said, "What if we do this?" And I'm like, "No, we're not going to do that," because I was frustrated that he started without me. And then I just realized at that moment that I judged his idea. So it's important that we defer judgment when we're using divergent thinking. Is that clear? Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I did an exercise years ago where you put up I forget exactly the wording, but it was something like, I want to get this result, and on the left side of the board, these are all the reasons why we cannot do it, and here's all the reasons on the other side why we can. And we put a big X through the why we can't. We only had a spot to
Yeah,
write. And then we spend all of our energy there. But same idea, where any idea is fair game. No shutting down the ideas. Just write it down, even if we'll never use it. Just write them all down.
exactly. That's a good segue into the next guideline. When you're divergent thinking, you want to come up with wild and crazy ideas. And this is challenging for some people. You don't want to stick to the ideas that you've seen work before or that you know are going to work. I mean, you can use those, but they're not going to help you innovate, and they're not going to be creative. And if your goal is to come up with something creative that's going to be surprising, then you have no idea what's going to work. You can come up with ridiculous and absurd and useless ideas. And I'll give you an example. Let's say we're trying to figure out the best way to travel from one city to another city. And we're coming up with ideas. We have the obvious ideas. We can take a plane, train, automobile. We can take a taxi. Maybe we ride a bike. And those are typical. But why not say, let's ride on the back of a unicorn? That's ridiculous. It's not going to happen. Unicorns don't exist, and it's not possible. But perhaps somebody in our group was in Walmart or some large store a week ago, and there was a kid that was talking about unicorns and rambling on and on. And while they were at that location, they noticed a material or an idea that might apply to this situation. And because somebody brought up that useless and ridiculous idea of riding on the back of a unicorn, that person was able to connect unicorn with this product or idea that might work, where otherwise it may not have. Another thing you can look at is, why do you, like, what's valuable about riding on the back of a unicorn? Why would we even think about that? Maybe it's all about the experience. Maybe that's what we're looking for, a unique experience for our clients or our business. Maybe there's a connection to animals. Maybe that helps us while we travel to make it less stressful. But the idea is that we don't know the answer. We're not pinned down to one idea. We're not looking for the one right answer right now. We're just coming up with ridiculous and silly ideas. And for me, this is what I excel at, is coming up with these ideas, because I can come up with crazy ideas that hopefully will lead to something useful later on.
Yeah, I love that. And I've done something similar where it's not a brainstorming session, but I'll read books that are maybe outside of my normal group of categories that I would read about, but I'll get a business idea from something completely unrelated to business. I was reading a book about fixing my knee pain or something, and I read a sentence and it triggered an idea for business.
Uh, yeah, that's a whole nother creative topic right there. Innovation happens at the intersection of dissimilar fields, and learning about things outside your normal realm is great, because it, as you just mentioned, it helps you learn new topics you can apply. For example, there was a Japanese engineer who, he was working on the bullet train, the Japanese bullet train. And one of the problems they had originally was when it passed, it made so much sound because it was going so quickly But this guy, he was also a bird hunter. And so he was watching a kingfisher bird hunt one day, and he noticed how the kingfisher bird dove into the water when it was hunting. And from that, he was able to come up with a design for the Japanese bullet train. And so yeah, it's
Interesting.
always great.
Yeah.
That's another part of creativity is you have to be curious. You have to learn. Don't confine yourself to your field. When you get into other fields, you start to pick up ideas and techniques, and you can cross pollinate. And yeah, definitely, that's an awesome point.
Very cool.
So the third rule is that you want to come up with lots and lots of ideas. And what this is about is there's something called the third thirds rule in creativity. And the third thirds rule says that the first third of ideas you're going to come up with are going to be pretty typical. They're going to be things that you've seen done or you've seen work before. Second third are going to be a little more abstract. Now you're starting to push the boundaries, you're getting a little more creative. But that third third of ideas, those are going to be the money makers. Those are going to be those unexpected products that change the industry or that change a client's life. A lot of times we when we're trying to come up with solutions, we also go with the first right idea. And although that idea may work, there could be better solutions behind that if we kept on going. So if we're brainstorming, if you're trying to come up with something that's going to affect your business for the next quarter or even the next year, or if you're doing strategic planning and you're thinking, the next 5 years, it's worth it to spend a few hours brainstorming, coming up with, 300, 500 ideas. If 30 of those ideas are plausible, they're going to be way better and they're going to be way more creative than the 30 ideas that you might have come up with if you spent an hour or 30 minutes. So yeah, you just want to come up with lots and lots of ideas. And yeah, you just want to explore again, come up with those wild and crazy ideas. That's another part about having that safe environment and that trust is to come up with ridiculous ideas that are not going to make any sense, but they may or may not lead to something creative. And then the last rule is that you want to build on the ideas of others and you don't want to assign credit. A lot of times people think that creativity is, the lone mad genius working in a laboratory. But in fact, creativity is more of a team sport. And again, if we're in a uh, group brainstorming session, everyone is contributing. Even if I don't speak up, which I should, but even if I don't speak up, I'm still providing that safe environment. So everyone is involved, everyone's responsible. The reason you want to build on other people's ideas is, let's say we're trying to come up with a new marketing technique where we want to get into a new market and we're trying to reach a new clientele. If you say, let's use a billboard, let's come up with a really creative billboard. Then I say, well, let's come up with a billboard on whatever avenue. I don't want to feel like I just stole your idea because you began that process and then I built on it and then somebody else could build on that. It's a process. Creativity is all about process and you shouldn't necessarily focus on the product, if that makes sense. But the idea is that you want to build on people's ideas and keep going. And then you don't want to assign credit either, because as I said, it's a team sport. We're all contributing. And if we start assigning credit to somebody's idea, then we shift the balance of responsibility for the overall goal. When everyone has the same mission, they should have the same purpose and the same goals. We want to come up with a successful method or product. And it's important that we don't assign credit because we're all contributing. No matter if it's the boss or the person at the lowest level, everyone's contributing.
Absolutely. And I think what really drives it home for me is when I think about whoever came up with the idea, and even if it gets expanded on, it's still just an idea until it gets acted upon and put into practice, whatever it may be. And that usually is going to require a team, unless you happen to be in like the rare case where you're like a one person show. But probably 99% of the time, it's a team effort. And so it is a group reward to get to whatever the result of the idea is.
Absolutely. And And it also helps build that culture, that culture of creativity and trust, because everyone has ownership over it. Yeah, that's a great point. So here are some final thoughts. I'm going to go back a second here. Before I talk about the final thoughts, one other tip: when you're trying to come up with ideas or think of possibilities to a problem with an unknown solution, instead of using words like "how can we do this" or "how are we going to do this" or "how should we," if you use the word "how might we do this" or "how might we accomplish this task," the word "might" leaves our minds open to new possibilities. If we're saying, how are we going to solve this problem, how should we, or how will we do this, that boxes in our minds, and it comes with commitment to the ideas. So we feel like we have to come up with the right idea when we don't know what the right idea is yet. So again, if you're working with a client and the client's saying, I need to reach more customers, or I need to release this product, if you say, how might we approach this problem, that's going to help open up the client, and they're more relaxed mentally. And it's just a subtle, that one word can open up possibilities. So yeah, so to kind of wrap everything up, be open to surprise and unexpected outcomes. We don't always know where the product is going to lead. There's a story of, there was two engineers in the 1950s that came up with this ridiculous idea to make 3D wallpaper. It was by fusing together shower curtains, and they failed because nobody wanted 3D wallpaper. Then they tried to rebrand it as greenhouse insulation, and that failed too. And then a few years later, when IBM was ready to send out their first shipment of computers, they needed some way to package them to keep them safe. And somebody remembered 3D wallpaper as a way to package them. And they tried it, and it worked. And so that's the history of bubble wrap. That's where we get bubble wrap from. And it started out with a wild and crazy idea that failed. So a lot of times these ideas, they take time to develop and to define the true purpose of how they're going to work. Next, you
Yeah.
want to let go of assumptions and judgment. I like having people come up with impossible ideas. What would it be like if we didn't have gravity and we were trying to do our job? Like, how would I teach creativity if there was no gravity? And the idea behind that is I let go of those assumptions because I know it's impossible. So then I can explore new avenues or new ideas that I may not have considered before. So yeah, you want to let go of assumptions, even challenge assumptions. Again, you want to think of ridiculous and absurd ideas. I like using those words. I went to a workshop a couple years ago where this guy was a trainer all over the world, facilitated workshops, and his whole thing was ridiculous, stupid, and absurd ideas, and I loved it. And then finally, you want to be playful. A lot of times, as adults, we lose that playfulness, we lose that imagination, and we think that play is this waste of time. We don't see value in play because we think of the guy in the boardroom with a suit and tie, and he's got to be serious because business is serious. But if you play around, even with your words or ideas, if you blow bubbles in a meeting, it's going to relax you. I don't know if you've heard of that tiger in the back of your mind. You're waiting to be attacked because of your thoughts, your ideas are judged. When we play, we let go of that. And we're natural. Like, play is a natural thing. So I even dance around, a house. I've had jobs too where I dance around too, because it loosens me up. I'm having fun, and if I'm having fun, then I'm going to be more successful than if I'm some you know uptight in a suit with a tie choking me. So seriously, just let go of judgment and have fun, and be open to surprise, and be open to the unexpected.
That's amazing. So what would you, let's turn our videos back on here. Um, let me just get yours going here. What would you, great job on that. I really like this topic. It can go so many different directions, right? So if somebody's watching this right now and you wanted to give them a simple exercise, whether they have a team or even if they're just sitting alone, what's a good place to start if they just wanted to dedicate the next 15 minutes to creative thinking? What's something they could do? Would they look at a problem in their business or in their personal lives, or I guess it could be anything really? What would you suggest they start with if they wanted to try a little creativity exercise right now?
If you have a problem already that you're working on in your personal life or your job, then write down, sit there for 15 minutes, write down 100 or 20 or however many different ideas. Think about how you might solve it, and you can even let it go. If you focus on it for 15 minutes and then you let it go, what's going to happen is your mind is actually still working on that problem without you being aware of it. Some some ways to help you come up with ideas are if you go for a walk or if you sit alone in silence, and again you stop thinking about it or you get away from your computer screen. That's going to help your mind process that information. Your subconscious is searching for solutions. If you want to do an activity, you could write down 20 different or 100 different uses for a coffee cup other than holding liquid. And so that's I think it's called the alternative uses test. This way of measuring divergent thinking. And so you come up with, you could use it as a paperweight to prop open your door, and then you're going to come up with these other wild, crazy ideas, and it's just going to help you open your mind. There are a few techniques that you can do to intentionally do that. There's research, empirical research, that shows that if you do something familiar in a different way, that's going to help create cognitive flexibility. So in the study, and I can't think of the name of it, I know Dean Simonton was one of the authors, but in the study they had people from, I think, the Netherlands make butter and chocolate chip sandwiches, which is a common breakfast food over there, and they had them do it in an unusual or different way. And they found out that people who did that were able to come up with more divergent ideas and more creative ideas. So it's just a way to help spark your brain, kind of awaken your brain, because we live so much on routine and assumptions. When we do something like writing my name with my opposite hand, my brain has to think and it's activated at that moment. So then afterwards, I think it lasts for a couple hours, you'll be able to come up with more ideas and stretch reality and things like that more. So
Cool.
yeah,
Yeah,
so many.
as you were saying that, I was actually thinking I've got a multi-notebook system that I use every morning for different things like studying and planning and whatnot. So I've got like, different colored ones, and the red one I use for a lot of this type of stuff where like you can't really see it here, but I one day, several times I've done it where I just sit down and make a list of ideas to attack a certain problem in my business. And then I'll just do that I'll set a timer. Like I'll set, like you said, set my iPhone. It'll literally buzz after 15 minutes. And I'll just stop because I'll have to move on to something else. And I don't
Yeah,
even think about the list that I put, and I'll revisit it, a week later or 2 weeks later or whatever. And sometimes just one of the ideas I wrote down didn't seem like anything at the time. And now I come back to it and it means something different. Like,
mhm.
oh, I can actually do something with this. And at the time it didn't even register, but it was weird. Like it was almost like you said, my brain went and worked on it more after that. And then when I went back and read it again, it looked like a totally new idea to me. And I've got some great ideas that we've implemented in my company doing just that.
You're touching on, there's a theory called generativity theory, and I'll talk about it real quickly. There's 4 competencies that you need to do or you need to have in order to come up with creative ideas. The first one is one of them is you need to record your ideas, just like you talked about. Record your observations, because you never know when it's going to be, like when it might turn into something useful. Like you said, like you write it down, you don't think about it, and then later on your mind is able to connect that information or new knowledge to come up with something. So you need to record. The other one is, like you mentioned before, learn things outside of your normal realm, because then you're going to be able to cross pollinate ideas. You're going to challenge assumptions and, yeah, just expand your thinking. Third one is change your environment. So if you have your office is set up a certain way, your mind gets used to seeing everything in the office. So when you go in, you're not even thinking about there's a spot on the wall or there's something over here. So if you change your office, you're going to be more aware of what's going on around you, and also, take a different way home from work because you might see something new. And then the fourth one is to do things outside of your comfort zone. So that goes back to failing. And you need to be able to manage that failure. And so, yeah, those four things of failure, recording, change your environment, and learn new things. So, yeah, you've touched on two of them already.
Yeah. It's so interesting hearing you kind of bring the theory and the structure to stuff that I think most of us do in subtle, kind of intuitive ways. And this really crystallizes it. So really appreciate you coming on and sharing all of this. I know you've put together a couple of different gifts here, so people can look somewhere on this page. We'll have information about that. Where's the best place to get a hold of you beyond what they see here in terms of what you're giving away?
They can go to my website, experience2creativity.com. That's experience2to creativity.com. They can sign up for my newsletter, and when they do that, they'll get one of the products, which is 5 of my epic cards that have different prompts and questions and activities that they can use with their clients or with a group or even at the beginning of the morning. So in there they can find my products and services and more information about what I do.
That's awesome. Well, for those of you here watching this from our community at Tools Motivation, Daniel is one of our peers. He helps clients think creatively, and so we can model a lot of what he's doing. I strongly recommend you check out what he's put together for us. Hear the downloads there, and if you have any questions, just let us know. Once again, Daniel, thanks. This has been great.
Man, thank you, Justin. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, we'll do this again soon. Thanks.
Awesome.